Somebody should sing a song or something. Peace Corps song. I know we got some singer here. Go ahead, bust out.
Go ahead, Maceo.
No, I don't have any songs. I'm not really good at that part.
I like it. Oh.
Thank you. How are you, friend? I feel like I haven't seen you and Maceo in forever.
I know it's been a while.
Yeah, how was your event?
It was good. Thank you. It was really, really good.
Good. So sorry I couldn't attend, but I was sending you much light and love.
I appreciate it. I've received it and I'm still receiving it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good. How was the auction, the silent auction? Or was it silent? I don't know if it was silent.
Like I was just telling, we were just doing a debrief and I was like, we definitely have to continue that as a piece of what we're doing. It went really good.
Nice.
I somehow spent too much money myself trying to outbid my boss. Somebody got in my ear, was like, "You gonna let him take that piece away from you?" But other than that, good. How have you been?
I've been well, just grinding away, trying to make sure all is well during the pandemic. But I've been good.
It's so good to see so many young people on the screen. You know, you guys got a big job ahead of you. I hope you know that.
Melvin, I just want you to know I'm including myself in that young people bucket, and I appreciate you for calling me and saying that I was young too. I just want to let you know.
As you should.
As you should. I'm looking at all these 30-year-olds and 25-year-olds.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah. But I'm the grandfather of the group, so I can say these things.
That's right.
And you guys got to take the mantle and carry it. I've been carrying it. Trust me on that. But the next generation got to step up, and that's my message for tonight. The next generation got to step up, take the baton, move, go at warp speed, because they're trying to take us out of here, Anyway, I don't want to get too radical with this group.
It's been about 5 minutes, so we can go ahead and get started, and as people start to trickle in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Diaspora Coalition and Decolonizing Peace Corps' event on an intergenerational conversation between Black RPCVs. So tonight we will be sharing knowledge, experiences, and perspectives about Peace Corps, its future, and ourselves. I will be your moderator tonight. My name is Uminyasi. I was an evacuated volunteer from the Gambia, West Africa, which is also my home country. I served there for a short time, only from 2019 up until the evacuation. Currently, I am living in the Boston area working with youth that have, If everybody can just mute themselves, please. Okay, thank you. Currently, I'm living in the Boston area working with youth that have mental and behavioral challenges. And I'm just trying to figure things out with going back to school to get my master's in public health and planning out how to get back to Gambia. So those are really the only two things on my mind right now. And just to share a few guidelines for the night, if everyone could please mute themselves and turn off their cameras, just so the focus can be on the speakers, that would be wonderful. Next, while I'm introducing the speakers for tonight, if you feel comfortable doing so, can you please add your country and your years of service next to your name? Just because we were thinking it would be nice to look into the crowd or look at our screens and see all the different places and times in which we all served. Also, if you would like to send your email in the chat box for like networking and building community purposes within the Black RPCV community, then you can do that as well. Lastly, if you have any questions for our speakers as the night goes on, you can add that in the chat box as well, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can at the end. So our first speaker of the night, we have Lane Benton, who is an RPCV from the Dominican Republic, serving from 2016 to 2017. He was a youth, families, and community development volunteer in Beatty Santa Maria in the southern region of the DR. Currently, he is a master's student at Arizona State University in the Justice Studies program, focusing on egregious anti-Black violence and community mobilization. Our next speaker we have, oh, sorry, Lane, did you want to say something? Okay. Our next speaker we have is Maceo Thomas, who is an RPCV who served as a Senegal health volunteer from 1995 to 1998. With close to zero French on arrival, when arriving in his village, he used his brand new French skills to learn Pular. As a health volunteer, he focused on maternal immunization and found he also enjoyed working with villagers in their agroforestry work. During his extension year, with another third-year volunteer, he produced programming that publicly showcased HIV-positive individuals, something that had not happened at that time in Senegal. Maceo misses the great people and the phenomenal music, and especially the chicken yassa, the mafe, and mangoes falling off trees. Next, we have Zahada Gillette-Pierce, who is an experienced policy analyst, researcher, health educator, and community change agent with over 6 years of experience working towards sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice. Zahada earned a bachelor's degree from American University in Public Health and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. She is a twice returned Peace Corps volunteer where she served in Togo as a community health and malaria prevention volunteer and in Ethiopia as a health extension volunteer. Zahada currently works as a trainer focusing on birthing and reproductive justice for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, with a heavy focus on Black birthing parents and Black folks who can get pregnant. Zahada is pursuing a postbac and is the founder and co-director of One Diaspora Coalition.
It's nice because they waive a lot of the application fees. That's so exciting. Yeah, that's exciting because I applied to one school that...
If everyone who is joining in, could you please just mute yourselves and turn off your cameras, please? Thank you. Our next speaker we have is Emmanuel, who served in Mali from 2011 to 2012 and Cameroon from 2012 to 2013, and had a varied experience training teachers, advising small community associations, and formally teaching English in secondary schools. He had the opportunity to work in a small village of 1,500, medium-sized of 8,500, and a city of 150,000. Emmanuel has tremendous experience working with volunteers and is currently with the Park Ranger National Park Service managing the volunteers and park programs.
Oh, there's something I got playing in the background.
Next, we have Mr. Melvin Foote, who is an RPCV who served in Eritrea and Ethiopia from 1973 to 1976. He has worked on African issues for more than 35 years. He is the founder and president of the Constituency for Africa, a 25-year-old Washington, D.C. based network of organizations, groups, and individuals committed to the progress and empowerment of Africa and African people worldwide. In 2002, Mr. Foote also founded the African American Unity Caucus, a broad-based coalition of African American and other Americans of African descent who lead or are leaders of Africa-focused organizations and groups to promote Pan-African cooperation and to link diaspora leaders in the Western Hemisphere with the African Union as part of their 6th Region Outreach Initiative. Further, he serves as a consultant to the World Bank on African diaspora issues, as well as advises the African Union's ambassador to the United States. Next, we have Misha Lorado Robinson, who served in Benin, West Africa from 2000 to 2002, and in 2012 in South Africa as a marketing manager for Special Olympics South Africa. Ms. Robinson is a social entrepreneur committed to generating innovative and impactful changes in organizations and communities. She currently works for Unite. Unite is a growing community of diverse people across belief, experience, and expertise dedicated to fulfilling the promise of America Together. Ms. Robinson is also the founder and chief executive of Hope of I Am, We Are, a US and South Africa registered nonprofit dedicated to empowering youth across Africa and the diaspora with the tools to confidently own their futures. Ms. Robinson has also managed multi-million-dollar brands for Campbell Soup Company and Reckitt Benckiser. She has also led marketing and communications efforts for nonprofits such as the National Peace Corps Association and higher education institutions, including George Washington University. She received a Master's of Business Administration and Marketing from NYU's Leonard N. Stern School of Business and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. So as y'all can see, we have a wonderful group of people here with us tonight. And like I was saying before, for the people that are just joining in, if you could just mute yourselves and turn off your cameras just so the attention can be on the speakers tonight. If you have any questions, then feel free to add those in the chat box and we will try to get to as many of those as we can at the end of the night. And if you could add just your country and years of service next to your name, just so it can be something cool for us to like look at and see all the different places that we all have served. I didn't put mine up there, but I served in Gambia, West Africa. So to start us off tonight, one of the biggest traits that the Peace Corps says volunteers need to have when they are applying to serve is resiliency. But if we are honest, like difficulties are so wide ranging and how varied they can be. And, you know, we all face different things during our service. So what are some things about your country of origin that you wish you had known or been informed about before your arrival in country? And if you had been given this information, how would that have shaped your decision-making process in deciding if you would have stayed or if you had gone? And we can have Lane, you can go ahead and answer that first, or Maceo, whoever wanted to tackle that one first.
I can go first. So something that I learned about in the Dominican Republic when I was there was that in the early 1910s, the US Marines were there and they actually trained one of the worst dictators in Dominican history who ended up murdering 25,000 to 30,000 Dominicans, Haitians, and Dominican Haitians. And so knowing that and then being put in a batey, so batey is predominantly a Haitian shanty town that the government from the Dominican Republic had used propaganda to get them over to tell them like, hey, we'll give you a free living, we'll give you a great life here in the Dominican Republic. But once they crossed the border, they took their papers and burned them. So the Haitians couldn't get back to the DR, and then they were forced to work in the sugarcane fields. And so being put in that scenario and seeing that life, and then you go to like Santo Domingo, the capital, and you see like, it's bougie. It's just like parts of Phoenix where I live. Like kids are balling out, their parents give them all the money that they want and need, and we're calling it the global South. And I'm like, it's not that. Like, I wish I would have known what that experience was like for the Haitians, because Haitians face so much hatred and animosity on a daily. Like, I would sit on a bus going to the capital, and we had these chequeos, so these checkpoints where the police would literally stop us and pull every Haitian off the bus to make sure that they had their papers. And they would use force. And I'm like, what is going on? So like, I'm seeing this violence, this anti-Black violence from one Black country to another Black country. And it hurts your soul. Like, you don't want to see that. Mm-hmm. And I just wish like I had learned that when I was there. So anybody that goes to the DR, like, I hope that you like can understand the severity of the hatred between the Haitians and Dominicans, because it's really bad. And where I was living, it was terrible. The police would come into my town and just like beat kids. Like, we'd be having basketball practice and the kids were getting beat just because we're Haitian. They thought they had drugs or something. And I'm like, nah, like, these kids are amazing. Like, we've traveled to many different cities and played in basketball tournaments, won it, getting recognized. And now you're spewing this violence onto us. Like, that's not something that I wish anybody would have to see in the DR if you were to serve, if like Peace Corps is still a thing in the future and people serve in the DR. Like, that is probably the most agonizing thing to witness.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that that would have changed your mind about going had you known that beforehand?
I don't think so. I think I would have focused more so on building that brotherhood and sisterhood, that family connection, because we are all, like in the DR, we were all Black, whether Dominicans wanted to accept it or not. Like, they're Black, some were darker than me and some were lighter than me, but I'm like, right. Christopher Columbus still colonized here, so like, this is a thing. So I think I would have focused more so on a familial connection.
Okay. And Maceo, you had unmuted yourself. I think you wanted to answer that question as well.
Yeah, I think that's, this is where we see the multi-generational diversity with this question. when I extended in, I came home after 2 years. They sent me home for a month right before my extension year. And that's when I first got my very first email account. So this just shows you this is just to set up the fact that information at the time when I was serving was not super available. I mean, you literally would have to go to the library. This was something we talked about last night in our prep call, where at the time when I was a volunteer or, prepping to go to Peace Corps, they sent you a folder and there might have been a brochure that gave some basics about the country, which I read. Clearly there are libraries. I didn't really go out of my way to do a bunch of study on Senegal. It was a surprise to me when it was time when we were in training, when it was time for us to be assigned to our different areas of the country, and so many other people knew what was going on in different parts of the country. For me, going to Senegal, it was the second country I had been assigned to. So I left of March of 95, and I was originally August the year before, I was supposed to go to Nigeria, but they had some political problems. They were having coups back and forth. And so I didn't go. So by the time that it was time for me to go to Senegal, I had been in the process of the application process for 2.5 years. So I knew when I got to Senegal, even when, like, for the first month when I got to my village, I didn't have a bed to sleep in and I slept on the floor. And then finally my hut got built, and another month later they built my own latrine. And then when I had the experience of the village where I was not really being super open to doing some of the work that we were kind of tasked to help work with, I found a whole nother village to work with. So for me, my experience was like a bunch of different roadblocks, and nothing that was going to make me say, oh, no way am I going to deal with this. But the information about the countries beforehand, like, I mean, there was, by the time I left, there was still plenty of things I was a great deal that I had not learned about Senegal. So it was, the whole experience was the discovery for me.
Right. Yeah, you're kind of leading us into another question that I had for tonight, but did any other of our speakers want to tackle that question beforehand?
Yeah, I'd like to say something, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I'm the elder statesman of this group, having served in the Peace Corps in 1973. Now, when I was told I was going to Ethiopia, because of the stories of the Bible, I thought Ethiopia was in the Middle East. I thought it was next to Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And I said, I don't want to go to the Middle East because of the war. You couldn't Google back then. I know our brother talked about setting up an email account. Back then, nobody even heard of email. And so there was no information, there was no Google. So I went to the library and found a map of Africa and saw Ethiopia was in the heart of Africa. That was my background about Ethiopia. Now, a Peace Corps never told me there was a war going on. I was placed in Asmara, which is in Eritrea. And the day I got there, the war broke out. And it was on the Ethiopian New Year, which is in September. So I'm laying up in my hotel room and boom, boom, pow, pow, boom, boom. I'm thinking 4th of July. They're out there celebrating. Let me put on some clothes and get out in the streets. And I get ready to go out, and the woman said, you can't go out there. So I went back in my room and looked out the window. There were tanks in the street, tracer bullets. That was my welcome to Asmara. And so Peace Corps eventually evacuated me to Ethiopia to serve my second year. But there was also a famine going on. Peace Corps didn't say anything about the famine. But when they drove me up to Asmara, all along the way, people were just starving all through Wollo and Tigray province. Peace Corps didn't tell me anything about that. So I look back on it and I say, gee whiz, they certainly could have done a better job of briefing the volunteers, but they had this thinking back then, don't interfere with the internal affairs of the country. And they saw the drought and the famine and the war as being internal affairs issues. So we come a long way since then. I think Peace Corps does a much better job of briefing volunteers when they do arrive. I think the handbook is probably much better than what it was back then. But I saw it all as excitement. I had no intention of going back home. In fact, I wrote an article for Ebony Magazine and told the brothers and sisters, I'm in Africa, do something with your life. Don't crawl under a rock, which was the slogan for the Peace Corps back then. And a number of people actually joined the Peace Corps because of that article. But I had no intention. I was happy to be among my sisters and brothers in Africa. My language skills were minimum at the time. But I felt the whole time I was there, despite the obstacles, and there were many, but despite the obstacles, I was just happy to be in Africa. And this was in the 60s and 70s when we were having a lot of social upheaval here. And Nixon was the president, and that's when he got impeached. But Nixon said, love it or leave it, love it or leave it. And I left. I joined the Peace Corps and left. And that really was my motivation back then. So I'm happy I made that decision, and it has really led to everything that I'm doing today was a result of my time serving in the Peace Corps.
Yeah, I really love to hear that, like the differences between like serving at that time and serving now. And it's really interesting that you said that now Peace Corps does a better job of briefing current volunteers. And I wanted to pick on Zahara because I know for you that's like a touchy subject. So if you could share for yourself. I don't want to share your story for you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I served in Togo in 2017, and I left because content warning, we're going to talk a little bit about sexual violence, but I left because of sexual violence and had to go home and tried to get my life together for a year, but I didn't have any tangible skills. We all know Peace Corps, the first year you're building, but the second year is when you really get your skill. You really start to practice doing the work that you've been, planning for. So I didn't have any of that. So I went back to the Peace Corps and I went to Ethiopia. Very, very happy to be there. We're doing all the beginning exams and everything, and I get to my medical exam and they pull me into the office alone. And they said, hey, Zahara, we just want to tell you something because of your history with Peace Corps in Togo. And I was like, okay, yeah. They told me that Ethiopia has one of the highest, if not the highest rates of sexual assault and harassment. And I was like, I don't know, I just felt like a huge burden all of a sudden because I was like, okay, this is great for me, but what about everybody else? Like, why are you only telling me? Why was this not something you told me before I even came here? Because they definitely told us that there was going to be a lot of, strife as a Black volunteer because of the way that, the US makes Black folks look. So had I known that, that would have been great. And also we're talking about briefing being better. It's not. I was living in Bashasha, which is the hometown of Dr. Abiy Ahmed. And when everything was starting to arise, I was still there. They didn't tell me anything. Our phone was getting cut off. We couldn't have any internet for weeks. We couldn't leave certain towns. I had to stay at home. So no, the briefing is still the same. They don't brief about anything that needs to be briefed about. Or they do, just not to certain people.
Did any of our other speakers want to speak on that question? Okay. Yeah, Zahara, you kind of started talking about race a little bit in there. Oftentimes in our work, there can be a sort of disconnection about how your colleagues or community view the world versus how you experience it. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but during your service, how did the experiences of navigating topics like race and gender show up, and were there any advantages or disadvantages in those experiences?
That was directed to Zahara. Did I hear that?
No, anybody can take that one. Well, I was just saying, Zahara was kind of digging into race a little bit, so.
I can start. Oh, who's that? Emmanuel, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I was gonna hop in real quick because during my service, when I was in Mali in 2012, That was when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And, you know, at the time, like there's some social media, Twitter, you know, hashtagging type of stuff is taking off. But you don't have like the sort of Instagram, you know, sort of like information sharing that happens like right now, and like the promotion of things through social media like that. But anyway, it wasn't something that really hit for staff and volunteers too much, and like as a topic of discussion, or how we would want to, you know, cope with that situation, or even just like talk about it in general. So it was just like completely ignored. And so, you know, that sort of like hurt. It was like confusing, like while you were away and overseas. And so, you know, there's certain like, you know, support networks where you can maybe talk to some other volunteers about it, but you really don't get that feeling that people really get with that sort of like, you know, trauma that brings up for people. And then also just like being in your host country, like, yeah, I'm amongst like a lot of African people, but they're not everyone is like hip to those sort of social dynamics that go on in the US. So I think I just came to a realization that it's like a lot of people just really aren't equipped, you know, in those positions. Like their mindsets or like what they're focused on isn't not really there for you. For instance, like if something of that same sort or same magnitude happened for someone in that country, your, you know, language teachers, your PCMOs, whoever, like they're not necessarily going to talk to you about it and like kind of go through all those details and explain or expect you to understand it. So I can't even imagine them trying to console me or like talk to anyone about those issues when they do come up for Black American volunteers.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because also last night Melvin was kind of telling us about, you know, getting more Black people involved with Peace Corps. And I think that that's really important because, you know, it is important to have that community, because as issues arise, like if you don't see anybody else within your cohort that looks like you, like that, it takes a toll on you. And there's been volunteers that have chosen to go home instead of, you know, finishing their service because they didn't have anybody else to go to when certain issues around race were showing up or certain issues around gender or sexuality. So it's definitely really important to have people within your cohort that look like you that you can have to lean on when issues do arise.
But you know, the way I dealt with that, first of all, I said, I'm going to Africa not to deal with white people. I'm going to Africa to deal with Black people. And among my colleagues, there was only a few of us, as I think it was 3 or 4 of us Black who were in my group. And so when we were going through the language training, you know, we would have to walk to school every day out in the rural Ethiopia. And all along the way, when the kids in the village would see us coming, they would run over to us, you know, kids playing soccer, they run over to us and say, Salam Ferengi, hello foreigner, hello foreigner. They would go right past me and grab the hand of the white volunteer. And I was kind of stung by that at first. I said, gee, we're the brothers here, why they ignore me? After a few weeks, I realized they were ignoring me because they looked at me and said, well, he speaks a little funny, but he must be from the north or something. You know, I'm one of them. And that's when I got real comfortable in Africa, walking to school every day. And some of the whites, Ethiopia is known as the country of the Habashai, or the burnt face people. In other words, they're burnt-faced Caucasians. They're not African. They're not Bantu. They're not from Kenya. They're not from you know, African states. They are independent. Ethiopians have you know, their noses are pointed. They say a pincher lick, you know, skinny nose, looking like a European. That is what Ethiopians, you know, pride themselves, light skin, that kind of thing. So it was hard to, you know, adjust to some of that. But I was in a totally receptive mood because I was in Africa. And for me, the whole time I was there, I laughed and I was just happy to be there. Now I was isolated. You know, I didn't go chasing the white volunteers. I didn't, you know, a lot of them were just visiting each other, and, you know, I didn't do any of that. You know, only time I saw them when I went back to Addis to get my shots at the end of the year. I wasn't trying to hang with them or to be with them. I really was trying to and so most of the people I socialized with were Ethiopians. You know, they were people of color, they had Black people. And that's how I dealt with it. And I still deal with it that way today. Even in my work today, I don't go out really looking for white people. I really go looking for black people, you know, and that's why I'm kind of happy to be on this call tonight.
Misha, did you want to?
Oh yeah, I was actually chuckling, but I can add to that. I completely concur with all of that. And I was just, even when you asked the question, I kind of was like stuck for a second because I was like, issue, challenges, race and gender. In some regards, like, I think my experience, I went to an HBCU, and that was after growing up like in a primarily white area, and I was like, I'm done with this. So I went to an HBCU, and then after that, I lived in Atlanta for a year. And I think, especially when I was in Atlanta, I think I just didn't have any interaction anymore with white people, even though I'm living in Atlanta. Like the restaurants I went to, my job was all black people. And so when I got to Peace Corps, I was in culture shock, one, from just, it was my first time ever being overseas. But then in addition to that, like it was I hadn't been around white people in like years. And so I think, especially during stage, as we called it in Benin, like I definitely kind of went through some of that of just not being able to relate to my peers. And then I think to everything Melvin said, I just made a choice of what I wanted my experience to be like. So not that I didn't have relationship with my stage mates and other people in the country, but I also, even to this day, had very much stronger relationship with my other Black peers in the country. And then I created the conversations that I wanted to have. And I think even during my second service, I kind of was like, I'm older now, I know what to do. I ventured into the Peace Corps community for a second, and I'm like, I ventured right back out. Like, so I've been in South Africa working there since my Peace Corps service, going on, I don't know the math, 7 years. I can't think of what year, but where we are. But I literally made my first American friends only a couple years ago, because all of my peers were South African, and those are the people who were in my community. So I think when I did not come there to be like exactly what Melvin said. My experience wasn't about white people. It wasn't about, dealing with all the muck and guck of America. I came there, to give and be of service in the community and in Benin, and to learn about the culture and have that experience. And so as much as I could, even though I was in the Peace Corps community, I also was like, this is the experience that I want to create. And I think as a Black volunteer, I definitely, and like, especially West African volunteers, there was always that song that you got sung as a foreigner, in Benin, it was like, Yovo, Yovo, bonsoir, ça va bien, merci, that we got followed all around and little kids sang to us. And there was a different experience as a person of color, or a Black person as a Peace Corps volunteer. But also on the other side, I had a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't relate to. Like, there were all sorts of experiences that they just did not get, that where it was like, as a Black person, there are these commonalities, and that I utilized those to navigate through the culture in a very different way that I saw that they could. And so to me, I felt like in some regards, there was a richness to my experience that they would never be able to have, because I connected and bonded with the people in my community in a very different, authentic way that they couldn't just grapple with. And so to me, that I'm not going to even talk to them about some of my experiences. I'm talking to my other Black peers. And then even though we didn't have really internet, we had Black Planet back then, and that was about it, and I would go like we only got internet access when the sun went down in my village. But I mean, we went to other countries, and I knew some volunteers in Togo that were Black, and, we would hang out with them, and we met up in Ghana, so we were able to create a network even without WhatsApp and the internet of Black volunteers across West Africa, or at least in our region as well, and got together too and supported each other.
Yeah, that's very valid. Like, being around Black people, being around your people, period, like it does something to your heart. Like, it's really good for your soul. So I love that you were able to do that. And many of us were able to do that, trying to find different ways that we can connect with the local people, because it would feel weird to leave the US and still be around white people all the time, Yeah, go ahead.
So in the DR, so I'm the only person who didn't serve in an African country.
But you're okay, bro. That's all right. We still love you. It's okay.
Give them a pass.
But very much like everyone else, so I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm biracial, so I grew up with my white side of my family, and they would say some dumb stuff all the time that literally would get me so mad, like I want to fight them, and I wouldn't understand it. And then I went to the DR. Well, so I applied to Dominican Republic, Morocco, and another African country, because I was like, I don't want to deal with white people. Like my mom, I love my mom, but she annoys me so much. I'm like, Mom, you just don't understand, with everything going on. And so I get to the DR, and much like Michelle had just said, that the host country nationals in Botswana said that like white volunteers were better. I would get that all the time in my community in the DR, that like, oh, we had 2 white volunteers before you and they did so much, you're not doing anything. I'm like, oh, really? Like, why? What makes them different than me? So we would have that conversation daily. It would be exhausting, but then they'd be like, all right, let's go dancing. And so like going out and dancing merengue, bachata, and just like having fun with Black folks around and not feeling like everyone's got their eyes on me because I don't look like everyone else, but I look like them. It was so rich for me. And then like talking about gender with them, I lived in an evangelist community, so like it was very religious. So I read the book Go Tell It Around the Mountain by James Baldwin in service, and my community was like that book. Like in the churches where people were falling out, and it freaked me out. Like I had never seen anything like that. I was like, well, what's happening? And so I was trying to learn their viewpoints of religion. And I had a conversation because somebody in my community had just mentioned like to their family that they were gay, and like the community spit at them every time they walked by. And so I would walk with them and they would spit at me. I'm like, don't do that. Like they're still a human being. They're still your family. Like you're not going to treat them any different. But it was because of the religion, and they used the religion as a scapegoat to spew that hatred. And I was like, nah. So I actually helped that person move from the community to the capital and introduce them to another volunteer's boyfriend, because as a gay couple in the city, it was a lot easier. And so I would go hang out with them all the time because it was just like getting them out of there and just seeing, and they're like, thank you so much, because it was like to show them that the whole community isn't like that for them. It was so refreshing to make one small impact, because in my service, it was difficult to get that sense of doing something that was worthwhile.
Yeah. And yeah, you said that was a small impact, but there's people watching, and there was probably some young child that was watching that situation happen. So it's like, yeah, you helped that one specific person, but it was probably a bigger impact than you probably even think that you had.
I want to add, when CFA had its conference, excuse me, we had our conference last September here in Warwick. We brought together a group of intergenerational group of Black volunteers similar to this. One of the recommendations coming out of that was that we should forge a network of those of us who served in the Peace Corps. So as new volunteers go to the field, they can have a group that they can actually reach, can kind of brief them to be a big brother, a big sister to, using the fact that we have technology at our disposal. One ideal is that we ought to reach back and really take these new volunteers who are going into the Peace Corps, and maybe 4 or 5 of us will serve as a network that they can get information from, they can learn experiences, because I had none of that. When I got ready to go to Africa, my father thought I was going to get eaten by a lion. I didn't know, I really thought Tarzan would be at the airport to meet us and to take us to the village in a herd of elephants, because there was no knowledge whatsoever about where you're going. I give myself an A in terms of courage, but I think for the volunteers who are going in the future, we ought to make it better for them. The African American volunteers who are going in the future, we ought to commit ourselves to, mentorship and helping them to establish themselves, in the village. What is life like? I mean, I'm just saying here what we're saying here. I think we have a heck of a lot of experience that we could impart on those coming after us, which will make their life a lot easier.
Can I add just one thing to add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
But I think in addition to just mentorship of Black volunteers, during the once they've actually gotten accepted and about to go, I think there's an opportunity too for us to get involved as RPCVs much earlier in the process and drive awareness that Peace Corps even exists. I know when I was going through the process and just trying to even consider, like, one, I didn't even know anybody who had done Peace Corps. I mean, again, dating myself, I found out about Peace Corps because it was like those postcards where you rip off on the wall in my college classroom, and you sent away the postcard and they sent you the brochure back. But that's all I knew about it. And then, from there, like I happened to meet somebody at my church who had served, but I needed people that looked like me and that I related to give me an understanding about this experience. And I think to what Melvin just said, also helping, I think, because of what we've experienced as Black people in this country. And I think especially as like, you know, when you look at the experience of Black women, there's a lot of fear of like that unknown when you start venturing out of what sort of is accepted within our community. We need some people to be like, it's okay, you're not going to get eaten by the lion. And, you know, it's okay, Black people do this and we do this and it's going to be okay. And I think we need to be there as role models to say, this is an option to be able to, you know, have that cross-cultural experience and be able to do these exchanges and learn and travel to Africa and know that Black people do travel and we have passports. And I think we need to be there in those elementary schools and middle schools, high schools, and even universities as much as possible, just being an example, even if it's just simply Black people that travel. I think that's, you know, part of what's needed to even get this process and these conversations started earlier.
Yeah, definitely keep. Oh,
No.
Maceo, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to just talk about, so when I was in training, you know, we had a cross-cultural class and there was nothing in response to racism. The only thing that, you know, there was about 5 of us Black folks out of 72 in my training group. At the time, there had recently been some battling between the north of Senegal and Mauritania. Mauritania, even today, might still hold slaves, and so as Black people, we were told don't cross into Mauritania. So that's what we got as Black people. What I recall very well is that during our cross-cultural training, the white volunteers were experiencing being ostracized by the color of their skin. At that point in time, I would just put on my Walkman, and I'm pretty sure it was Tribe Called Quest that I had. And, you know, I had to be there. So what did they say? I'm just here so I don't get fined. So I would just have the music going and their lips were moving and I was sitting in the back, and because it wasn't for me. And I was clear it wasn't for me. And, you know, from K through 12, all of my classmates had been white. I went to UMBC, most of my classmates were white. So I was totally used to that experience. I wasn't expecting them to deconstruct and distort racism at that time. And as Melvin said, I was, you know, during my application process, the way you did it, you can prioritize which region you wanted to. Africa was number 1 for me, even to the point when I didn't go to Nigeria, they were like, hey, you can go to South America in a month. And I was like, nah, I'm trying to go to Africa. I really didn't know anything about Africa. I was a science major. I didn't get to study a lot of history or sociology or, you know, African American history even. So I did really want to go to Africa. So a couple other things about to tie on to, you know, here we are 20 years later from when Melvin was in Peace Corps. Whenever I got to the car, people would just have these wild stories about me. Like I had all these women in the village because it was like, well, why aren't you coming to Dakar like all the other volunteers? Here's where the air conditioning is. Here's where the ice cream is. Here's where the pizza is. And I'm like, I'm not here for the white people, you know? So, you know, so they just knew like I had something going on in the village. And then when I extended, my Peace Corps director, he was like, hey, Maceo, I want to offer you the PCVL position, which basically was a support position for volunteers. You had a nice little house that was attached to another house where volunteers could stay when they came in the field. And I couldn't say this to him, but in my mind, I was like, I was an RA in college. I dealt with white kids' problems in college. I did not come to Africa to deal with white kids' problems. So I came up with something and he accepted me to stay. And, but yeah, so, and then I'll just, and I know I'm going long. I did a COS trip with someone who's like a sister to me now. She's a white woman. She's a principal in the Bronx right now and doing really great work. And we both extended, we both did health. We were both in the same area. We were super close. We knew about each other's family back home. We knew about our little personal stuff, you know, in where we served. And our 3rd year project, we worked together. So we traveled, we ended up getting in Ghana, like Kumasi, and we were sitting out in the courtyard drinking. And it was the first time we ever talked about racism in like 3 years. And she said something to me, and I took my beer and I put it down. And I said, you know, Kirsten, most Black people would rather pull their fingernails out than have to deal with white people. Her face, she's always already pale. Her face like went ghost. And to me, it was just like, it's something I'll never forget, because here we are, like, you know, close as of friends. And we had not, at that time, had not had any kind of conversation about racism. Here you had this white woman who like loved these Black African Senegalese men. You had this Black man who was in Senegal, and we just, two Americans who never crossed the line to have that conversation. I think, you know, as we're having this intergenerational conversation, what's wonderful is that now these conversations are just every single day conversations. Like when I go down to, you know, Black Lives Matter Plaza and I see all these white people out there, I'm like, where y'all been? But I'm not gonna give you a hard time, because this is your fight. This is where you're supposed to be. Glad to see you here. And it's such a huge change. And I'm sure that has moved directly into what the values of Peace Corps volunteers are taking into their service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely keep all that in the back of your heads, because we will get into like the future of Peace Corps, recruiting Black volunteers, recruiting POC volunteers. But some of y'all have kind of already got into this, but for the speakers that didn't already speak on this, for some children of the diaspora, their Peace Corps service might be their first time in the motherland. And, you know, regardless of who you are, when diving into a new environment, no matter how much research or reading you do, like the reality is that history books are only just the beginning, and you won't know until you truly go and experience things for yourself. So with that in mind, how knowledgeable were you of the motherland, and what misconceptions did you have that were unveiled once you got to experience life there for yourself? And for Lane, I know you said you were the only one that didn't serve in Africa. That's okay, but you can also speak on this as well.
Can I kick this over? Melvin, did you want to go first?
No, go ahead. You go first.
So I have to admit, like in high school, I went to Seneca Valley High School, for those who are here in the area. So I grew up in a very white country area in some regards, suburbs now, but it was country then. But I was in like full African clothes like throughout high school. Like I was eating my bean pie, reading the Final Call. Y'all are all blonde hair, blue eyed devils. I was that girl in high school at Seneca Valley. Like that was me, which is why I went to HBCU. But with that said, and like always, like 3 goals coming out of high school, I'm a travel to Paris, travel to Africa, live in New York, right? So I get to, you know, Benin, and I think, and I had this like OMG, I think, you know, in some regards, and I was looking at a survey for my job yesterday, and one of the questions was, you know, do you identify as an American, you know, first, second, like where is that in your priority? And I think I only really understood how American I was when I left the country. So I did have this sort of internal dialogue and fight with myself, because a part of me was so in culture shock and show, like, you know, very candidly, just like I struggled. Like I really, my first couple months, I didn't eat tea really because I didn't want to go back in shame in some regards. Or, you know, I was like, I'm determined to make it through. I'm gonna make it through 3 months. I'm gonna make it through 6 months. But like the latrine thing and I had cockroach, you know, all some of this stuff that, you know, just I had never lived overseas. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know anything about living overseas or living in that environment, and kind of was shocked from that. And everybody else was just like, it's okay and it's fine. But I think I also, a part of me expected some sort of like Alex Haley roots welcome home experience. And it wasn't that. And it was sort of like, you know, you're a Yovo, you're white, you know, which is white or foreign. And I'm like, no, I'm not. My parents are Black. Okay, fine. You're Métis. And like, no, I'm not Métis either. I'm not like mixed. And so like all of a sudden not being Black in this, you know, I made it to Africa, I'm not Black. And then also just feeling like in some regards at first, because I was struggling so much internally with being comfortable, like I didn't relate to my white peers. I didn't feel like, you know, I wasn't sort of Black here, in some regards, into, to host country nationals, and then also didn't have this like welcome home my sister experience. So it really wasn't, especially in those first couple months, what I expected. And it took some time for me to get comfortable too, and then also learn the history. But I think for Benin in particular, and I think, I don't know, Zahara, if your experience in Togo, but like, it's where the slave trade started. So that also in some regards, to that experience of people not really knowing, and this is 20 years ago, but not knowing that there were Black people in America. And so trying to have those conversations of, yes, there are Black people in America, yes, I am Black, this is what it was. Or even that experience of when we went during stage to Dahomey and to the castle, and like very nonchalantly hearing people be like, this cannon was worth 20 women and 15 men, and we shipped them over to get this weapon. And I was like, it kind of like the way the history was told wasn't what I expected. And so I know it was something that I struggled with and kind of had to understand and kind of seek within and grow, but it definitely wasn't what I had. Like I had this romanticized view of Africa and the motherland. And I had to come to grips with what the reality was and kind of be able to like, accept it for what it was and see it for what it was. And I think that's something I always challenge like Black Americans with, this notion of kings and queens and this and this and this, and there's much more to Africa than just that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and both Zahara and Lane, you both spoke on that during our prep call last night, and Zahara, just knowing you personally, like this is something that you've spoke on as well.
Yeah, so I had really two very, very polar experiences, one in Togo, one in Ethiopia. So in Togo, I had a really, really close relationship with my host family. She had already had a Black woman volunteer, so she kind of was comfortable with, talking about race. We even had some amazing conversations about slavery, about colorism, about like, she let me stay home one day and was like checking on me all the time after I had a really racist experience with one of the white volunteers. She was like, no, my baby's not going out. She's going to stay in, like bringing lunch to me because she got it. But I feel like it was just having those interactions with different types of Blackness that facilitates that type of knowing, right? But then when I got to the community that I served in Kasuntu, which is in the Central region, I was getting called white like all the time, and I couldn't get it. I'm like, I'm Black. I've been Black my whole life. Like, I know that I'm Black, not just how my skin, but also just the way that I'm treated in America. Like, I know I'm Black. So then to come here and to be called white over and over again, it really made me just start to look at race in a very different way. And then I started to question, like, am I getting treated better because they think I'm white? Am I allowed to come into these circles because they think I'm white and because I'm American? So that was something I always had to, try to think around. And then in Ethiopia, people thought that I was Ethiopian. So I didn't know the language. They were like, come on, baby, we got to teach you this, we got to teach you that. I'm like, sis, it's not even like, I promise. I'm actually Togolese when we did our ancestry. So I'm not Ethiopian in any way. But it was very much so like white people are better. I would have my white colleagues come to, sorry, my little cousin in the background, but I would have my white colleagues come to the community that I was in, and they would jump to help them, jump to be around them. Nobody really wanted to help me unless, it was for other reasons. It had nothing to do with just genuine wanting to help. They would come to the health center that I worked with because I was in the health sector both times. They would come there and automatically folks want to hear everything that they have to say about these topics. And I'm like, I actually came here with experience. This person was studying economics. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I do reproductive and sexual health. So very different experiences. It was very, very easy for me to get work done in Togo, but not so much in Ethiopia. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the topic that we can go on about all day. Like the differences between how white volunteers were treated and Black volunteers, especially being somebody that served within the last 5 years. I know later in the discussion, we'll get to that, like the differences, but we could talk about that all day. But Lane, you wanted to say something? Yeah,
so for me, being in my site was very, for me, I felt conflicted, right? Because I was living in a shanty town. And so the Haitians would all call me white. And I'm very prideful in being Black. And I'm like, no, what we're not going to do is call me white. Like, I don't get treated like a white person in America. I don't want to be treated like a white person here. Treat me like a Black person, please and thank you. And then Dominicans would get on that train too. And I'm like, well, we're not going to do this again. So the Peace Corps created this power structure, right? So like the 2 volunteers before me were both white. So there was a power structure of like the white volunteer, the Dominican, and then the Haitian in my community. And I tried to break that cycle because I was like, I'm not here to say that I'm doing all these things for this community. No, I'm just here so that you tell me what you want me to do so I can help you get and achieve your own goals. Like, that's my purpose in Peace Corps, is because the people before me, they're like, oh, well, I got to do this, 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 and this. And they didn't do any of that. And I didn't want to make a promise that I couldn't fulfill. So it was like, let's just focus on the community aspect. But every time something came up, they looked at me as like I had the solutions. I'm like, I don't know where to get the resources for all these things. Y'all know these. Y'all work in construction. You'll work with the governments here. You know the syndical. You know the mayor. You know the governor. I don't know any of these things. So why am I here to help y'all? When you have all these things, you're teaching me more than I'm helping you. So I think that's what like I struggled with in the DR, is like the power structure. And I was like, oh, I'm not about that. I didn't like it. So that's why I just focused on coaching sports, because that made my service, it showed my community that I was more so willing to work with them and not to do it all myself and say that I'm doing all these things.
Yeah, and that's definitely great, because that also leads us to our next question. And that's something that I wish more Peace Corps volunteers would have, like once they get into their service, like being more empowerment based and realizing that you're only there for 2+ years. You know, at the end, you're going to go home, but these people are very capable of doing things for themselves. So I wish more volunteers would get it out of their head. They're like, oh, they need me here, and if I don't do this, they're not going to do it. It's like, no, you need to realize that they are very much capable and they have all the resources and all the education to do it themselves. Just because you have an American degree doesn't mean that, you know, that just means that you can automatically fix everything. And this was something that, Emmanuel, you were really excited to talk about, but Peace Corps' current requirements are to have a BA or a BS degree in any field or 5 years of professional work experience. So with that, do you feel that volunteers are going into their service well equipped with enough experience to do their job well?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty excited to hop on any of these questions, but I generally don't think that a lot of the volunteers that get selected like have, you know, the proper qualifications. It's like, okay, most non-applied degrees, like essentially it's just you know, it's the same repetition and sort of like automated type of knowledge. You know, your ability to fill out forms and do these things and kind of like synthesize. These are great skills, but they don't always translate into the countries of service when you're working like at a, you know, small community level. So, you know, I don't think there's enough effort being put forth to like actually recruit and find people who have 5 years of professional work experience and may not have gone to college or something like that. You know, I understand why you do go after younger volunteers or prospective volunteers. It's like, okay, there's this sort of like promise of youth and idealism and moldability that makes it easier for them to integrate or kind of like get on with people in communities, the curiosity and all that sort of thing. But, you know, there's a lot that people with different experiences have to give, other than just like, okay, I have the privilege of having gone to college and have a certain status. Like, no, there's other people who have like really grinded and worked similar in the same vein as the people in these smaller communities have, that could go and represent, you know, this country in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely don't want to talk about my service at all. Like, this is for you speakers, but I remember I would hear a couple of times from volunteers. It would be like, oh my God, somebody in my village, you know, they went to school in Europe. And they would be sitting there and talking about it like it was so like out of this world that somebody within Africa like went to school outside. And I'm like, you know what? I can't even talk to y'all, because if I do, I'm about to get mad, you know? And like, because I served in my home country. So like anything that was said by white people, I like took personal offense. So yeah. And I also love the chats that y'all are having in the chat box. So keep those coming.
Yeah, I want to add here, I always thought the Peace Corps is part of your life experience. I never felt that a 22-year-old or 23-year-old, I was 22 when I went into the Peace Corps. I never thought we had a lot to offer anybody. Now I've done a lot of work on development assistance. I was country director for AfriCare. I've done a lot of work on development projects across the continent. I can say that when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I couldn't do that kind of stuff. I had no knowledge, I had no skills, I had no history. All I could do is really show you that America is trying to help Africa, and African Americans are a major part of this. I coached basketball. I taught them a good hook shot, but if I don't think I had the skills, I don't think 22-year-old have the skill or the knowledge to really do much, quite frankly. Not everybody, but most of them. But I think that this is your entry level. This is how you get involved in Africa. This is how you get involved on the global side. Since then, I've gotten degrees, I've gotten a lot of experience, and I certainly can help right now. So I don't see it as a total zero-sum gain. I see it as a part of the process, getting young Americans into developing parts of the country. We certainly learned a lot. I learned more than I was able to get from my host country, I think as a Peace Corps volunteer. But that's only part of the story. The other part of the story, what are you going to do with it, especially now that you are here? Are you going to educate Americans about Africa? Are you going to advocate on behalf of African issues? Are you going to be involved in lobbying the US government to support the vaccine program in Africa now that we have a vaccine for COVID-19? That's what I'm going to do. I couldn't do it as a 22-year-old Peace Corps volunteer. But if I didn't go through the Peace Corps process, I would not be here today talking about these other things.
Emmanuel, you shaking your head over there?
Sorry.
No, I'm just agreeing. I'm agreeing with.
Okay.
You're agreeing with him?
In terms of having, okay, for instance, I'm talking about people with lack of experience. I mean, I went over having had a job for like 5 years as a teacher and did a few other things, but it's like I can't say that my experience or my professionalism or whatever it is didn't grow. My own ability to do different things didn't grow by going. It's like I wouldn't be where I am right now on this call with y'all, or having gone to like my graduate programs to do or whatever, had I not been there.
Yeah, so when I was in training, that was the first time I ever heard the word development. So there were people who had come in and trained with me, and they were clearly they knew more about the long game than I did. I had never heard development. I knew about Peace Corps as a kid. So while Melvin had already come back from Peace Corps, growing up on TV, our commercials were the toughest job you'll ever love. So I'd seen that as a kid. And when I got to college, there was a recruiter. But Peace Corps as like this development organization was never something that had been pushed on me. And so I went there with this understanding of this cross-cultural experience. I had a science degree. As soon as I came out of my interview, they're like, yeah, we're going to put you somewhere. And I think that was because they don't get like a lot of science people. But the training that I had, I think it was the work that they wanted us to do was basic enough that the 10 weeks in training prepped people who, this one friend who I talked about. So I was a health volunteer. She was a art major, and so a lot of what we learned about, clearly there was like this community diagnosis process, but a lot of the work as health volunteers were meant to be, you can read and write, and you can keep the books for the nurses and help figure out where the babies are who are unvaccinated. That part of the work wasn't meant to replace anybody. It was meant to kind of support some additional work. But again, one of the things as we ended training, we had a little skit and said, we educate, we don't vaccinate, just because there was a lot of thoughts that we were there as actual medical volunteers. And there were volunteers from other countries who were actually nurses and doing medical work. So I always would say, and in the 20 plus years since I've been back, I spent a lot of time talking to Black people specifically about joining Peace Corps. And I think part of the process that Peace Corps goes through, having the college education is valuable in showing that you have completed something, because the application process to me is meant to be a qualifying process more than just like, are you qualified? But like, we're going to haze you through this process, you know, not intentionally all the time, you know, hey, there's going to be this medical thing you got to do. And I know you don't have any health insurance. Like I didn't at the time when I had to, you know, go through that process and had to drive a long way to a military base to get a free physical. And then of course, the country fell through. I was supposed to go through and they're like, hey, you need to take a semester of French before you go if you want to go to Francophone Africa. So I think the process of these basic qualifications are important because a lot of people, as quiet as it's kept, they're not going to do what we're going to do. You know, like you get 5 years into your career, it's a big deal to leave a salary to then get $200 a month as a volunteer. Not too many people are doing it. Not too many people are doing it straight out of college. So, you know, I do think it's important that, honestly, that they make qualifications even more strict, because I think it's important to know this is still the toughest job you'll ever love, and it's not meant to be easy.
Mhm. Yeah, I would definitely agree that qualifications do need to become more strict, and so much emphasis needs to be taken off having a degree. Like Lindsay said, like no degree can prepare you for this kind of work. So I would definitely agree with that. But Zahada, you were
Well, you just
also
disagree with me. You didn't agree.
huh?
You
No,
just
I was saying
disagree with me.
Lindsay in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
No more hate.
Zahada, you had wanted to say something about that.
Yeah. So I want to kind of first go back to what Mr. Melvin said earlier about there's so there's so much. But basically how this was like an opportunity for like cross-cultural communication, and how there's nothing inherently wrong with that. That part I agree. But also, like Lindsay was saying in the chat, and like so many of us on here believe, at whose expense, you know, at what cost, you know, at whose expense? It's on the people that we're going there to serve. We go there and their government, their ministries of health, they request us, specifically, they request Peace Corps volunteers to do certain tasks, okay? All these tasks are written out in the work plan. But there are people who are coming there with economic degrees going into a health sector, and they having to play catch up to somebody who, if they already had the skills, had the degree, did some work in the field, they could start maybe helping folks to come up with solution, you know, in a shared decision-making model, right? But these people are so far behind. They only have like first level 3 months of training. And I think someone said something earlier about how you're just literally hitting basics over and over again. Every 2 years, somebody else is coming in with basics. Rarely will you get somebody who's actually qualified to do this work, because these folks are coming straight out of college. You might have book knowledge, but you don't have lived experience. Okay. And then definitely agreeing again, degree is not everything. There are so many people out here with degrees who don't know half the things that people without degrees know. Lived experiences, research is valid. We need to stop putting all this emphasis on people having degrees, especially when the degree is in a US context. Everything that they learn is through the view and in the eyes of the US. They're not going to know anything on the ground. You might know conceptual things, but you don't know what's going on the ground in these countries that we're going to serve in. So that doesn't serve anyone. That doesn't serve anyone. And then, yeah, I think that's what I've got so far. But I just think we should definitely stop trying to romanticize this relationship that Peace Corps volunteers, and Black folks as well, that Peace Corps volunteers have with the nations that we're going to work in. because we are also a part of this arm of like soft neo-colonial power. We are a part of that when we go over into these countries. We're a part of that when we go and recruit other Black volunteers. We're a part of that surveillance. We're a part of what keeps folks dependent on US aid. So just wanted to.
I just wanted to, I think I build on a little bit of the conversation that started now. So I did Peace Corps, the traditional full 2 years, a year after undergrad. I went back exactly 10 years later after I COS, and I did, Response Corps. And so in between that, I had got an MBA. In between that, I went and got work experience. And part of the reason, one, because I wanted to get out of corporate America for a little while, and figure out who I was. But part of the reason why I did that is because I felt like I didn't know anything my first service, and I wanted the opportunity almost in some regards to kind of take what I had learned from my Peace Corps experience, take what I had learned from actually my master's degree, and also my real work experience. And I felt like I had so much more to give at that point in my life. And I think even to the way, a testament to that, the way Response Corps is set up, I literally was in the Capitol for 3 days. They were like, there was apartheid in South Africa, I'll see you in a couple months. I didn't know language. I didn't know how to take a taxi, somebody like my partners, one of my people from Special Olympics, she came and taught me how to take a taxi and all this. I knew nothing. When they kind of dropped me off, and I lived in Joburg for a month. But I think with that said, though, because I had done Peace Corps, because I had already done Peace Corps, and their very first question was about resilience, I knew what to do. I knew how to navigate and figure out things on my own. And then I think because, also the way Response Corps is set up, is there's a set position that, and I think they have changed the Peace Corps process since I did it, but, it was a set position that I was applying to. I talked to the hiring manager before I went to country. She actually had a chance to interview me. And so when I went, I picked a position, they hired me based on my skills and qualifications. And so when I got there, I was able to say, okay, I know how to do these things. I can do this, and come and then bring that together with my first Peace Corps service. I know how to hit the ground running. And even though you didn't teach me anything or tell me anything, I know how to figure it out on my own now. But I think with that said, I think just to add to that, the conversation about sort of academic, qualifications. I think the one thing that it would also make that experience more worthwhile for host country nationals, as well as the volunteers, the emphasis on interpersonal skills. And I think that is a distinguishing sort of characteristic on what people's service is like, and sort of how you relate with your community members. And that's something, I think I always tell people the best, educational experience I think I have had, and what has shaped me and how I show up even in my corporate and, jobs, is my Peace Corps experience, because it taught me to listen and to not rush so much, et cetera, those soft skills. But I think there should be more emphasis on character. And sort of, we talk about 21st century, skills and what they're teaching now in the kids in school. Literally, looking at where people, come on some of those core skill sets, I think is important, because that'll say how you show up, and that'll also dictate how you serve. And I think that to me is more important in some regards, or as important as sort of your academic, qualifications.
I just want to come and piggyback. I know we trying to have a whole thing, but I'm fired up now. So we have fired up. So we've got two things. One, Macy, I see you in the chat talking about, the jobs that we're sent over to do are not complex. We need to really sit with that for a second, because we are going into rural areas. There are people there who know those languages. They know the situations that the community actually need, which sometimes are not even in alignment with what Peace Corps is trying to do. And we're literally taking those jobs. We're taking those jobs. That's paid work. And we're coming in and taking that away. That's why we have these, what some Peace Corps folks say, low hanging fruit jobs. We're doing the health education. We're doing this, we're doing that. That's the work of health extension workers. And they're supposed to get paid. And because we keep coming in there doing health extension worker work, they're not getting paid. They're not getting the adequate funding that they deserve. So we're coming in and taking jobs. Second, I also wanted to talk about myself included, we're all talking about, look what I was able to overcome. Look what I was able to accomplish in such a short amount of time, even with the response. Look what my first Peace Corps service did for me. At what cost? At the expense of who? There are people who know the language, know the culture, know the problems that need to be fixed that are already there, have multiple degrees, or have that lived experience that's going to outdo anything that a degree can ever do. And we are coming in here with whatever we're, you know what I'm saying? Like it's that American exceptionalism. It's that we really need to start taking a bigger look at, because.
Can I comment?
Yeah, I need to comment too. I'm fired up myself. Go ahead, David.
Okay, Peace Corps volunteer. I served from 2018.
Get on the camera if you're gonna be here, David.
Oh,
naked or what? You just jumped in a bunch of panelists. Come on.
Hey, why David jump in? I need to see
yeah, he's seen me before. I was on the school.
Well, that's fine.
All right.
No, I'll say yeah. Peace Corps volunteer, Dominican Republic, 2018 to 2020. While Peace Corps does have its issues and its problems and so forth, I went there and, I went there, you get the language test, and my language was a 2, and, I had never taught in a classroom and all of that, but it was because I knew that I was deficient that made me more of a motivated volunteer. And I was able to do things for my community after you do the SWOT analysis and so forth, and you find out, what their biggest concerns are. And then I'm like, okay, I might not be able to do this, but I could do that. So, I could look back, and as a matter of fact, the principal at my school, before we were being evacuated, USAID came out there. He said like, send another one, a guy like that, because it was like an angel came to our school. Where there was not a library, I was able to build a library from the ground up. Where the kids were having to use 50-gallon buckets and drums to flush the toilet and everything, I was able to get grants and Engineers Without Borders to come in, and they built a well so that there can be running water. What I'm getting at, and I mean, not to be cruel, but if they could have done it themselves before I got there, they would have already done it. I mean,
bro, are you for real right now?
That's real. Me coming there with what little bit of skills I had, but some connections that I was able to get through Peace Corps. We employed locally. This wasn't us taking jobs. We employed locally. All I did was get financing and get some people some white folks that wanted to come in and do some nice stuff for Black folks.
I just feel like this is very disturbing, my friend. This is disturbing.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead. David, thank you.
I appreciate what David is saying.
Thank you for your input, David.
David is saying, David is saying what I'm saying also. My motto is don't agonize, organize, and I saw myself as a super volunteer. Now, having said that, when President Obama came to power in 2008, he sent one of his envoys over to see me and asked what could he do, given the fact that the U.S. economy was bombed out. He had to spend his time on the U.S. side, but what could he do in Africa that would let the Africans know that he cares about them? So I wrote a paper. One idea that I proposed to him is don't spend your time on Mugabe and Biya and Bashir. Spend your time with the next generation of leaders, the young people coming up. That became what is known as the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI. And we brought young people from Africa over here for 6 weeks of empowerment training, the greatest program in US history. Now, having said that, I'm lobbying the Peace Corps now to merge with YALI, bring YALI into the Peace Corps, where you got Africans coming from Africa over here and getting some experiences. I want more diaspora engagement, but you also got us going over there, And I think that 10 years from now, we got a heck of a Pan-African network if we can succeed and bring it. I mean, acknowledging that Africans bring a lot to the table. And you're absolutely right. You got engineers, you got health professionals, you got all kinds of folks in Africa with tremendous talent. But by and large, we're either supplanting them or not allowing them to reach their potential. But I think that the future of the Peace Corps, we're 60 years old this year. In the next 60 years, I would like to see a different kind of a Peace Corps that also embraces Africans coming this way.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to the future of Peace Corps as well. But I think Emmanuel and Lane, y'all also had comments on this before we move on to the next question.
So the Peace Corps is creating a narrative, right? That Americans are going to do this for your community. But in reality, are Americans doing what Peace Corps is saying that they're going to do? No. A lot of kids that I know that went to the Peace Corps did it for a gap year, right? And this is where I become very critical is so you graduate college and you don't know what you're going to do. So you go to the Peace Corps. And Dominican Republic, David, you know Dominican Republic is Beach Corps. You're on a beach every other weekend, you're drinking, you're partying. And so then the question becomes,
Tell it like it is.
I was in a potato, I was in Santa Maria in the south by Barauco. And I would see that in my cohort is everyone wants to go to the beach. So I was like, okay, but didn't you come here to do a job? And so the narrative is that they get these college graduates, and we've already said multiple times that people with different degrees have worked in different sectors. The answer to the question is, are they prepared or qualified? No, that is plain and simple. Like you can't give somebody with an economics degree and tell them to go into health and talk about reproductive rights and HIV and AIDS. You can't do that. They don't know it. You're starting from point one. Whereas in my situation, I had college graduates in my bate that did business, that did health, had all these degrees, but yet they still looked to me for an answer because I had an American degree. I just came out of college. I had coached baseball, I had coached basketball, I had coached wrestling. So that's where all my experience came from. So I took a job away from somebody like Zahara said. I took a job away from somebody that could have been working in 2 different high schools, focusing on sexual health, reproductive rights, on the xenophobia between Dominicans and Haitians. So to go back to the question, no. And this narrative that we're creating that keeps saying like we did this is exactly the imperialistic mindset of Peace Corps, that we're doing all of this for this country, but in reality, it's just making Americans look better. And because America has caused so much harm and pain in the past, like I mentioned earlier, Rafael Trujillo was one of the most dangerous, is the most dangerous dictator in Dominican history. I can't remember the name of the massacre, but it's because Haitians couldn't roll their R in the word perejil. So like, boom, you're dead. You can't say this word, you're dead. So, and Americans put that man in power. So it's just Peace Corps is trying to make America look good for what damages and harms they have caused.
And Emmanuel, I see you saying a lot in the chat box. Do you want to speak on that before we go to the next question?
No, it's cool. We can start to move towards a different subject, but you know, I mean, I agree with a lot that's being said. But I don't know. I just like to steer away from just like singular thinking and sort of like boxing or label everything as being purely one thing. Like everything is so much more multifaceted than that. Yes, this is a serious problem ingrained within the program. I think about how the staffing is set up. You have 3 American people running an office full of a bunch of people from that country and sort of telling everybody what to do and how the program should be shaped, this, that, and the other. So yeah, I mean, you know, from a very basic level, like you can see how that plays out. However, you know, people go into service for lots of different reasons and choose to give a lot of things of themselves for during that time period. So I don't think that everything is done within this vein of being purely in an advantageous relationship.
All right, so just moving away from volunteers for the current moment. And also I'm gonna type the question also in the chat box so so the viewers can also see what the question is. But with this one, it's a fact that, and not only a simple opinion, that colonialism has huge repercussions and impacts regardless of the specific colonizer. So during your time in service, what were some of these effects and remnants that you were able to identify, perhaps with like infrastructure or maybe on an emotional or psychological level within your communities?
So, okay. So one of my illegal border crossings was into Guinea-Bissau. And it's interesting. So I lived about 12 kilometers from the border with Guinea-Bissau to this town called Salakenya. As soon as you cross the border, so Guinea-Bissau was a Portuguese colony, and you know, again, I mentioned earlier, my history, my American history was terrible. My world history was awful. My African history was ridiculously bad. So, you know, I knew, of course, about the English colonies because it's America. You know, the Spanish folks. I didn't know anything about like really the French and the Portuguese. But it was so clear how awful the Portuguese were as soon as you crossed the border. Because when they left Guinea-Bissau, they like pulled up everything, like infrastructurally, like poles and like, so there was really nothing there. I think what I saw a lot just throughout West Africa and some of my travels, I remember going to Cote d'Ivoire, and people would joke about the Ivoirians who, and like, oh, they think they're more French than the French even. And so this idea of accepting your colonizers, you know, you're going to drink, you know, the demi-tasse of coffee, you know, cafe au lait or whatever, like just some of the cultural stuff that they accepted. And even like how well you spoke French, which is kind of like amazing. Like here's, you know, that's no different than being in the US, you know, how well do you speak English? You know, oh, that Ebonics that you're talking, nah, you can't do that here. So you saw that quite regularly. Now I will say that the colonial architecture, I love looking at it. There was still some that was very strong in the coast around St. Louis. But you know, you also still had like the educational system that was probably not great for the general population that was still, and probably still exists. And there's clearly, you know, my French wasn't good enough to totally understand what the kids were learning. But even just the system of A levels and all that, which was this system that funneled kids to a test. You took the test. If you didn't pass the test, you were done. Like, and then your opportunities to make it to lycée, to make it to become a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, you're done at like 11 or 12 years old. And that is something that wasn't really, I don't know what, you know, I'm not really in the education sector. So I'm really curious as to what is happening there in some of those systems around reevaluating that.
I want to add to that. It seemed to me that, you know, we, you know, the way Africans are structured is not much different than the way we are structured over here, African Americans, especially when you look at the plight of Black Americans and the education system, healthcare system, nothing different there. They had divided Africans up, pitted one tribe against another tribe, gave privilege to the Tutsis over the Hutu, you know, all kinds of things in order to get the diamonds and the oil and the gas and the resources in Africa, and they continue to do it. The same thing is true how African Americans are exploited over here. So the point I want to make is that it's not about we got it together here and they don't have it together there. I see this as a global paradigm, a global challenge. And honestly, it's going to go on for a long time. You know, we do a lot of things the way we do it. You get the people who are trying to get a lump of sugar, so they tell the slave master, oh, he get ready to leave tomorrow night, you know? And then you get a little lump of sugar, and is that not different from what we see today among some African Americans, you know? And if you're being whipped and all that kind of thing, you change your attitude. So it's not much different between colonialism and the plight of Americans of African descent here in the US, Europe, and elsewhere around the world.
Yeah, true.
Misha, you were kind of shaking your head. Did you have something to say about that?
You can disagree.
Oh, no,
No, she was shaking her head. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I honestly, and I think, this is something I've just through my travels have realized more and more, there's no difference between a colonial mindset, apartheid mindset, segregation, apartheid, colonialism, all of that, slavery, it's all, one and the same, part and parcel, and we all have been impacted by it in different ways. And I think, what Melvin was talking about, and I think part of it's beautiful to see, the One Diaspora organization, that it's all these organizations that are talking about us coming back together across the diaspora, and really, sorry, my dog's coming and talking to me now, but really us supporting and being there for each other and helping us all to liberate collectively from these, recognizing that we are impacted as much as they are, or as much as anybody else is in the world. But I think with that said, I think seeing sort of the language and what people say and how they view themselves, their own self-worth, especially in relationship to white people or your oppressor, I think was one of the biggest things that I saw to what we alluded to of just I'm automatically smarter because I'm light-skinned. Even just when I was in Benin, and again, this was years ago, but even that whole thing of men wanting to marry me, and the whole blessing of oh, there's a light-skinned woman now here kind of thing was weirded me out. Or even I think, in South Africa today, I experienced, my hair is natural now. It wasn't when I served in Benin, but just the, people, the fascination with my hair, my hair texture and, those conversations that I have around hair and helping, some of my peers to recognize and see the beauty of their hair texture and styling their own hair and, versus, some of the, and it's changing, but some of the conversations I remember somebody tell me I looked like I rolled out of bed because I wore my hair natural. Yeah, I'm gonna go because I need to go walk and put my dog out. Sorry, y'all.
Did anybody want to talk about that one before we keep it moving? Because this has been such a great discussion, but we are running out of time.
Yeah, I guess just to take it to a macro level real quick, the biggest place that I really saw colonialism kind of taking hold or just showing itself during service is the language part. Mali was really refreshing because, French is a national language, but you're not going to get fed speaking French. You need to speak something that's more local to the community. But in my second country of service, Cameroon, there's beef between Anglophone region and the Francophone region. And a lot of the sort of preference for the French speaking part is all, rooted in colonial legacy. So it's just there's 200 some odd languages being spoken there. And, I don't know. I just think that there's so much emphasis on the European languages and how that will help, people advance in their own personal careers and whatnot. But, everyone is speaking something else at home. Mm-hmm. So, I just always see that as the biggest legacy of colonialism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the topic of colonialism, taking it another step as well, Lane, you were talking a little bit about the colorism that you witnessed within the community between the Haitians and the Dominicans. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to apologize because I've been taking the word Dominicans and Haitians as a generalization, not to be a generalization of the entire country, both those countries, but more directly the community that I work with. And I was trying not to do that today, but that was a mistake of mine. So in the DR, much like Brazil, Dominicans have 30 different ways to say that the race is something other than Black. Mm. And so the colonial part of that is they're just trying to not be Black because to be Black is to be a threat, to be dangerous, to be less than human to them. But when they see their Haitian counterparts in my community, that's how they treated them. And I'm like, but hold up, I'm light skinned. You look at me as a power figure. We're the same skin tone, but because I'm American, you're looking at me different. But because they're darker than you and they're Haitian, you're spewing hatred on them. So that's the major colonial part that I witnessed in my community, as well as beauty standards. Men had to dress a certain way. Sammy Sosa, a lot of Dominicans started bleaching their skin in my community. And I was like, oh, what? You are Black. Be proud to be Black. And I think that was one thing that I noticed in my community that was so different. Is different parts of the DR that I had visited and spoke with folks about was this concept of being Black. So they would say Indiacito, so they'd be oh, I'm clear skinned or I'm light skinned. And that would be their race. And they would say that on their application. I'm like, bro, you're Black. Your ancestors came from Africa and the transatlantic slave trade, just like my ancestors came from Africa too. you are Black. And then you see like women putting these chemicals in their hair to straighten it. They be dyeing their hair blonde, bleaching their skin. So to make themselves look white. So they would do everything to continue this idea of anti-Black hatred, which I despise because of my community. I'm very proud to be a Black man, and very proud of who I am and my accomplishments, but I also wanted them to be very proud. And
yeah, but where did that come from? Where did that come from? I mean, you know, wanting to be white or wanting to be like the white man, that got us processing out here in the 60s and 70s, trying to look like we Caucasians. I mean, you know, some of this, the damage, that's why reparations are important, you know? So understand that, you know, they were reacting to trying to survive. So if I'm going to survive, I better look like and act like and try to be like and even accept the Jesus of that white man, right?
But another thing too is the dictator Rafael Trujillo during World War II brought in Jewish folks to blanquear the race, to whiten the race. He literally said that. And part of the massacre and all this, so the historical context of the DR is, it's not pretty. Like they're trying to do everything to look like white Americans, white Europeans, because of what they see on TV, the stuff that they experience. I have Dominicans, some of my best Dominican friends have been messaging me saying like, what is going on in America? Why are Black people dying to the police all the time? And I'm like, I don't have that answer. That's an answer I don't have. I can't give you something I don't know, but this is why when I was there, I was telling you you're Black, because outside of your country, people are gonna see you completely different. And so that was something that like I had to work with myself too, was telling you like, you gotta change. Nah. Like I'm not saying that they had to change, but I just wanted them to realize. And I'm falling into that narrative of Peace Corps. Like Peace Corps wants us to think this, and this. So that was what I was just trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them we've been dying, and we're just now getting it going.
What happened to Misha? Sorry. Okay, I definitely want to give this next question a lot of attention because that's the whole name of our discussion today. But since the conception of Peace Corps, cohorts that serve together have always drawn like a wide range of age demographics. You can have someone serving in your cohort who just turned 21 and somebody who's in their 60s and 70s. So each of these demographics, you know, bring their own different perceptions of the world to the table. So for those in a more tenured demographic, what is something that you wish others knew about your experience and perspective, or vice versa?
Do you mean like things that we dealt with people in different age group while we were volunteers, or just from our time of service, like to share with other people?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from your time of service. So like people who served 10, 20 years ago versus those of us who served like 5 to 7 years ago.
Got it.
So what is something that you wish we knew about your experience and your perspective? And what is something that, you know, we wish that y'all knew of our perspective and our experience?
Can I start off?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay, what I learned really was that how wealthy we are. Black Americans are the wealthiest Black people in the entire world. The most educated, the most healthy. Obesity is our biggest problem. You know, we're throwing away food. You can go to prison here and get 3 meals a day. What I saw in Ethiopia with water was just absolutely at a premium. And if you're talking about clean water, you're talking about something totally different. And so we waste all kinds of resources over here because we think that it's acceptable. It's what the world, we're polluting the environment. We're doing all kinds of things, even we as African Americans. And so I think that one of the things I got out of the Peace Corps was that let's be more stewards of our environment. Let's be more appreciative of our quality of life. Let's try to reach out and help others where we can, when we can. Even now when I look at, you know, I would get people here who would come in here in Washington and ask me for a coin or something. I need $1, brother, you know? And I'm thinking about my time back in Ethiopia, especially during the famine, you know, where, you know, women could not even feed their babies because of lack of food. And so there's a lot of learning that needs to go on. And I personally think that we as former Peace Corps volunteers ought to be at the forefront in educating our country, educating our people about the reality of the globe. I'm dropping the mic. I stunned them. See, I stunned them.
I know, they just shook. Did anybody else want to answer that question?
I mean, I have one small thing. I think just in the greater context of this conversation, maybe I think when I think back to my experience in the people I serve with, and I think in particular volunteers of color and Black volunteers. One, I think to what Maceo said earlier, I didn't know the word develop. I didn't know what development was. I didn't know about development jobs, State Department. I didn't know about any of that when I served. I truly did it and came in because I had a heart for service. I wanted to give. I wanted to connect. I wanted to be in community. And I think that's something, and I don't know, I felt like that's what the heart was of everybody, and that we pulled together and we supported each other, even though, I may have pulled away from my white volunteers at different points. I remember, and, we just did a 20-year anniversary a couple months ago. I think that willingness to be there and to support each other in different ways was part of that experience for me. And I think that's something when I hear the conversation around like looking at Peace Corps of the future and what it is, to me, I still go back to service. Like when I looked at even the description of this event, I didn't see service. And I just want to make sure and just really reiterate sort of that heart for service. And I think too, sort of the benefits you get those benefits anytime you serve. When you serve, whether I go serve around the corner in my house and there is definitely a space we need to be doing the same kind of work at home. That really is what Third Goal is about. It's about still making sure you still have a heart for service in your own country and you're sharing from that place of those experiences and teaching people and being an ambassador. But if I serve in Northeast DC, Southeast DC, some of those same benefits I got from you having 2 years of service, I will also get. And that's the sort of, kind of catch-22 of service. And so I think that's one thing I just want to reiterate and make sure that we all remember. And I'm hoping the next generation of volunteers that come in, it's about service first and foremost and what you can give and not necessarily what you get. It's not about, I don't know when it, I guess it was always there, but the career advancement and the, all those other things I even saw in the description of this event, I go back to like, that's where my heart was and many of the people I serve with, and not about trying to get a job in development and not about boosting my resume and not about trying to figure out what my life was going to be about, but how can I be of service in the world?
Bravo.
Sorry, Missy, I just jumped in. You want to go ahead?
No. I was hoping a younger person would pop in there.
Yeah, I was going to say somebody who served recently. Do you want to speak on it?
Fairly recently. I'm starting to get to that 10-year point, but
oh, damn, no, not him. We need somebody younger. I'm just joking.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off the service aspect because I always think about how difficult it is to assess what volunteer programs do. Sometimes it is about the quantity. I think about my own personal life. Like it wasn't just like one person who was really good at teaching me this one subject who got me through this whole way. It was a collection of different people along the way that maintained my interest and, talked to me or like had conversations with me. And I think that is something that kind of shows itself with Peace Corps service. Like, yeah, you have someone who will come in like piddle paddle for like 2 years and like da-da, but like, you know what? Over the course of 6 years, there was like this one teacher, or there was a teacher around at least to help inspire a student or help work with some students or what have you. So I think that does get lost in this a whole lot. So I just wanted to kind of, amplify that point also.
So the question was about what I was going back to read it, but I lost it.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, like, for
that comes with getting older. That's an age kind of thing. I do it all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, for the more tenured demographic, like what is something that you would like, volunteers who served in the last 5 to 7 years, let's say, or volunteers that are now applying, what would you like them to know about your service?
So I'm active on social media. I'm active on Facebook mostly. I'm a little bit on Instagram. There's a Black Peace Corps page And I've communicated with a lot of volunteers before they've got into their service and while they're in their service. One of the things that I would regularly say to them that is different from the time that I served, that Misha probably served, and definitely Mel served, is that our Peace Corps, my Peace Corps experience, good or bad of it, there was not a lot of communication with outside my village, honestly. Like I said, I had to go 7 kilometers to get to a phone. So the nearest volunteer was probably about 7 kilometers. I could get there in 40 minutes or something like that on a walk if I had my bike. I actually had a motorcycle, so I could get there in about 15, 20 minutes. That doesn't exist now for Peace Corps volunteers. I understand that people have phones. There's clearly like internet in a lot of places. And what I think about the benefit of how my service was, where I was the only one that spoke English within that 7 kilometer space. I was one of the very few people who spoke some kind of broken French in that space. So for me, again, I went into Peace Corps thinking of it as this cross-cultural experience with me being American, learn about Senegalese culture, the Senegalese people, learning a little bit from me about what it was like to be an American. They were surprised about this Black American. I thought they were very happy to see me when the volunteer motored me in, and it took some months before I realized they thought she was the one coming, but they were so happy. And so I was happy, but it took a long time for me to realize, oh shit, they thought it was going to be Misty. But by having this isolation, I'm so prepared for this pandemic, because I had to spend a lot of time inside of my mind. I read almost every Tom Clancy book. I read Roots. I created a dictionary, a French Poulard dictionary. So my French was like this big. So I had to challenge my mind in a way that was all that was right here. And then, I could build my language. That first 3 months, I remember writing a letter home, and I need to ask my mom about it. And I, wrote a lot of letters home. And I remember writing a letter, and I said, you know what, Mom, here I thought I was coming being one of, the most informed people, here I'm coming to this village, they're wearing these flip-flops, they gotta walk 5 minutes to throw a bag, and pull for a whole minute before they can get some water. And I'm the most ignorant person around. I can't even say, hey, I gotta take a tinkle. I haven't figured out how to say that. And the 2-year-olds know how to say that. So, it was this humiliating in the perfect sense of being humbled and checking a lot of these privileges that, we didn't use the word privilege, but these things that we thought we knew. Like I remember just growing up, the only time I really experienced people who didn't speak really great English, the church that my mom still goes to is in Shaw, 6th and P. And there was this Korean-owned store, and they didn't speak great English. And so for me, like if you didn't speak English, there was some intellectual. Why couldn't you speak English? And so I didn't really actively, I took Spanish in high school and then a couple semesters in college, but I never had to be immersed in a foreign language. So here I was immersed in this language that was not only was it my second language, it was my third language. And it was an experience that when I say broke me down, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to get a handful of Xanax or something like that. But it made me critical of everything that I thought I knew about Maceo Thomas, about Brenda Thomas, about William Thomas, about their parents and everything that I was taught. And even just like from, you know, eating with a fork and a knife versus eating with my hand. So I was at this very fragile point that I couldn't like ask anybody else, because here I was in this village experiencing and learning from these people who took such amazing care for me. You know, they didn't have much. They gave me whatever they had. They treated me like family. My laundry was always well done. Like, I mean, it was just love and care. And I remember the first time in Pular, you know, I like to tell jokes.
Oh, me too. I don't want to cut you off, but I really want us to get into these last
Okay,
two
let me
questions.
Let me finish
Okay,
it.
go ahead. Go ahead.
The very first time I said a joke in Pular and they laughed, I knew that I had spent some time with these people where they were able to help me with this language, that I was able to communicate my thoughts. And from there, it was lightning speed and just the relationships that I was able to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like once you get into laugh, it's like, okay, now we can start laughing together. Y'all can stop laughing at me.
Yep.
Just one thing to that though. I've been back to my country, and I mean, I went to a hotel in the capital and somebody knew who I was. Like I went back to my, you know, my, like, it was just amazing. I mean, we talk about that we're the only people that get an impact. I think that's not realistic. Like, I mean, I know I work in South Africa. The head of NBA Africa got an opportunity to come to the States because of a Peace Corps volunteer. Like, I think we have to be realistic about what really Peace Corps was set up to do and the change that is going to happen. And change is not maybe like systematic change. It is not, I don't believe it was set up to do like what a development program like a USAID and what the State Department is doing. But you talk about person to person, people to people change. The fact that people like, you know, they now know that there are Black people in America and we are all not criminals. If that was all I did, and they have a realistic understanding of who we are, and that all of us, even though I'm light skinned, I'm not white, does that make a difference? I think it does. Like I can WhatsApp now. I talk to my next door neighbors 20 years later. They still talk to me. They thank me for what I did. And they thank me for that experience. They're my friends. I have global friends. Like in South Africa, I have friends that have community. And I think if we don't put value on that, then I think we're missing sort of also in ourselves what really matters at the end of the day. And so yes, do wells matter. And I did that too. There is a well in a community that I can say is there because of me and because I helped bring it in there. But at the same time, the fact that I have a friend now over in Benin, that matters too. And I think we need to put some value on that as well.
Thank you for that. I really want us to get into the last two questions. I typed them into the chat box just because I feel like with this group, y'all are just going to get into both of them at the same time, which is fine. But the first part is, how can we as children of the diaspora serve Africa in the best way possible? And then what would you like to see in the future for the Peace Corps? So y'all can either tackle those two, tackle one or the other, but I just feel like we're gonna get into.
Yeah, let me start out. You know, we talk about intergenerational discussion here. My daughter actually went into the Peace Corps after me. In fact, she's online here. Miriam was a volunteer in Benin and was evacuated. She's now with the National Peace Corps Association. And so I feel like we have a daily conversation around these very topics. But I think the Peace Corps going forward, we're engaged with the Peace Corps. We're talking to the Peace Corps Association. And I can say that they're open for some ideas. They've hired Dr. Darlene Grant, who is in charge of strategic, how would you say, partnerships and also diversity and inclusion. Dynamic sister out of Alabama, you know. You know, we have regular conversations around some of these things. I find that they're open like never before. CD Glenn is on this call, I believe. CD is one of my heroes, the head of the African Development Foundation. So, I mean, I think going forward, I think my sister is absolutely right. Peace Corps was not set up as a development agency. If we want to talk about the dams being built and irrigation canals being built, it ain't happening with the Peace Corps. That's not really what the purpose of the Peace Corps. But I think that we can alter the Peace Corps going forward. We can make it better, you know. Certainly African American and diaspora participation in the Peace Corps is essential at the highest levels, at the policy level, at the training levels. Some of it, we don't need to wait on the Peace Corps to make happen. We can change it ourselves. especially the experience of African Americans who go into the Peace Corps and the recruitment of African Americans for the Peace Corps. We can increase the numbers. We can push it. I have a lot of access with Congresswoman Karen Bass and members of the CBC. I'm always lobbying for policies. But I think if we put our collective voices together, I don't sense there's anything that we can't do to improve the Peace Corps going forward. Not to say that it was bad, but any institution can be made better. And I think that the Peace Corps in the next 60 years ought to have more of our voices heard as part of the discussion about the way forward. So I'm very optimistic about this conversation tonight. And I think it does speak well to the future of the Peace Corps going forward.
Anybody else want to get in on that one? Yeah, this can be everybody speak on this one, just because it's like the closing remarks. I want to hear from everybody.
I wanted to get it in before because I thought people were going to go off on it.
I know. I thought that y'all were going to be like.
You know, people are playing that step off the mic thing too strong. So you know what? Here we go. And I'll keep it short. So I have not done a lot of work at all in Africa. Since my service. When I got back, it was that fence. I was like, ooh, what do I do? Do I go back to Africa and serve there? Or I worked in Baltimore City right before I went to Peace Corps. I think so, but when we talk about the African diaspora, I think the value of having Black people, Black American people serve is a way to expose us to see the world differently, to bring that work home, like Lane is doing in his master's work. My friend Nicole, she's in there. She's doing a lot of work here in DC with kids. I've known her for some years. So I think that skill. What I tell people is that skill set, that language, that cross-cultural experience, that exploration of your mind to critically evaluate what you think you know by learning from people who have been doing things the way they've been doing it for their generations and generations and generations is important also for us to share here in our work that we do here at home. So look at that, I'm done.
Next person can go ahead.
People being shy. David?
Yeah, I'll hop up. So I think something that would be great for the Peace Corps program is to maybe drop like they have like 3 primary goals. 2 of them are about cultural exchange and friendship. And one of them is about the technical expertise part. They can go ahead and drop that, in my opinion. And I think that they could also probably mandate or make mandatory like a year with AmeriCorps or another very like seriously intense like volunteer program, service-oriented program to kind of weed out some of the non-seriousness that you get from people who, or even like improve some people's interpersonal skills and experience with people from different backgrounds. So I think those are like pretty big tangible things that the program could do. But yeah, I don't know. It's for the future, I guess we could try to, do some different things recruiting, but I don't know. I feel like the tone or like idea here with this panel is to kind of elicit some different ideas that don't have the Peace Corps in operation. So I'd like to hear some of those as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody has differing opinions, not only on this panel, but in the chat as well. So keep them coming on both sides.
I'll just
say you want it. Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
Before we get into like, before the other side of what does it look like if Peace Corps isn't there? I think just the future of Peace Corps and existing and continuing. I think, Africare recently moved all of its operations like over to Africa, right? And I have a Peace Corps friend that, works for PSI, and they're looking and shifting their model to hire more in country and things of that nature. And so I think when if we're looking at framing of development, that model is changing and what we look at, I think, to sort of some of the feelings and sentiments here in this conversation. But I think going back to if Peace Corps really in some regards is about that people to people relationship and making sure that there's shared understanding. And I feel like that's needed more than ever as you look at the divisiveness within our own country, the fact that we can't have a conversation without throwing names and othering and things of that nature at each other. I feel like at this point in our history globally, we need these abilities to be able to come into relationship with each other, be able to have conversations and be in proxy and not just work in stereotypes and assumptions about who we are. But I'd love to see a model where Peace Corps isn't so much me from here kind of giving to you. And I know Peace Corps is really supposed to be based on shared, like, I'm living at the same level as you, et cetera. But I think there's an opportunity for us to even do that in a bigger way where you're almost like, it really truly is an exchange and we're working together from day one and being sort of, I don't know, I think to the points I think Zahada was making of like, how do we also elevate locals and make sure that there's jobs being created there? Like, how can we make sure that there really is a little bit more, equality or equity in that relationship and how we're going about creating these exchanges and also creating that relationship. So it is a little bit more of a mutually beneficial sort of experience for the community as well as for the volunteer.
Lane, did you want to comment on it? Because I think you're the only one who hasn't yet.
I'm conflicted, right? So I had an interview with a student here that's interested in the Peace Corps, and she asked, would I recommend her to do the Peace Corps? And I couldn't give a recommendation. I couldn't say yes, I couldn't say no, because for me, looking at the historical components of what America has done to these countries, and it's not willing to accept the fact that it is looking like Peace Corps is just, it says that it's for these other countries, but in reality, it's just for Americans. We are benefiting from so many privileges, right? I am a Coverdell Fellow here at Arizona State. That is a huge benefit that I benefit from. So I think Peace Corps needs to really address the fact that, is it really doing something for these countries and communities that it says it is? Or is it more so doing it so that Americans can put this on the resume, make it look great, like I did the Peace Corps, people love that you were in the Peace Corps? Or is it actually going to work towards the communities and not taking away their jobs, but providing more opportunities for those own countries to do everything that they need to do themselves? Because Americans, we don't have the answers for everything. We're not the resolution for everything. These host countries can do everything themselves. Whether we believe it or not, they have the same abilities that we do. We just see them differently because we live very privileged here in America at some components, whereas that lifestyle that they have is not the same. That we, like, our expectations are different than theirs.
I think Zahada, I said, Lane, you didn't say anything, but Zahada, did you want to say anything before we close it out?
Yeah, so I'm definitely in line with the abolishment of Peace Corps. I think it is too injurious of a relationship for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to engage in. That's from all different aspects of the diaspora. When specifically talking about Black folks, but that's from all different aspects. The things that we experience as Black folks in our countries of service with our cohort members. And I know everybody's talking about how, they didn't, congregate with other white people, and neither did I. But I also got labeled like this angry Black woman for doing exactly what Lindsay is talking about, which is going and speaking out. When racist things happened, I spoke out, and people would outcast me even more. I would get left behind. Nobody would protect me as they protected other people. They would leave me behind, like, well, you look like them, you're this, you're that, and you don't talk to us, you don't want to hang out with us, even though we say racist things to you 24/7. So those things like that, and also how it can sometimes be injurious to interact with local folks when they are living under that colonial trauma and thinking that white is supreme. So that can be injurious as well. And then what we really need to be focusing on is how injurious it is for us to keep going over here, like I said earlier, taking jobs. I'm not going to recommend a system that is oppressing me, oppressing my brethren, my sister, and my siblings. I'm not going to recommend that system. I really love what Peace Corps has done for Black folk on this call by helping them to become all these amazing things, helping them to take on all these amazing things. Some folks doing work directly to help African nations, some folks doing work here on the ground. That's beautiful. But what about the communities that you served in who are still having volunteers because what you went to do was not done? What about them? Peace Corps has not left since you've been there. And what Peace Corps is supposed to do is to phase out. An organization that purports to do the things that Peace Corps does, they're not supposed to exist as long as they have existed. So I love that we were able to grow, but at the expense of who?
Melvin, I see you were shaking your head earlier.
I
Did you
mean,
want to say anything?
yeah, I mean, when I go back to Ethiopia now, I go back as a diplomat. When they had a war going on with Eritrea, I went as part of a former Peace Corps delegation to go there to do shuttle diplomacy to stop the war. And John Garamendi, who's now congressman out in California, was part of the delegation. And it was absolutely a fact. So they looked at this guy who used to be a Peace Corps volunteer down there coaching basketball, now trying to stop the war between countries. And I can say there's a lot of other places that I feel. So I mean, I don't look at the Peace Corps as a single entity. If you want to kill the Peace Corps, certainly you want to kill USAID. Certainly you want to kill
I do.
Department, kill the World Bank, kill everybody. Go everybody live on their little life. But if you ask the Africans themselves what they want, Peace Corps is it's by request. You don't go there and say we're just coming in. We're not invading you.
By request by the elites.
Discussion that go on that you're invited in. So I think that certainly there's plenty of room for improvement. No question about that. I think a lot of the conversation tonight was focused on how do we improve, how do we make it better. I certainly see a lot of potential, but my view is don't agonize, organize. Don't get mad. Make something happen to make it the world that you are. And you want it to be. I love my African people. I love them over here. I love them in Africa. I love them in Jamaica. I love them everywhere. And so for me, I'm trying to, as a diaspora in the United States, our job is to push as many resources that we can to help Africa. We over here in the land of milk and honey, where we're throwing away food. Yeah? How much food do we throw away each week because we got COVID-19? Think about that in the village. And so for me, it's about, we over here in Washington, D.C. and all these places, our job is to push this country to do a better job of helping our sisters and brothers in Africa. With that, thank you very much.
Yeah, I really love this conversation. I wish we could go on. I feel like we could be here all night. But I don't see any more questions coming in from the audience. But from our speakers, is there any last remarks that y'all have that you want to give to the space?
I want to thank you all for inviting me on, along with these guests. I've never been on a panel with Mel Foote before, so I bow to you. I appreciate the work that you've done. I've seen you. I read about you, and the work to be a Peace Corps volunteer in 1973. Peace Corps was just 10 some years old. I watched the Franklin H. Williams documentary that was just recently done, and they don't talk enough about the Black experience. There clearly were Black people early on, and interesting enough, I think Misha was the first one that they interviewed.
I was the first recipient of that award.
There's that. But what I'm saying is, as they talk about the history, even in this film, they didn't even focus on, the Black experience because we haven't been there. But then when I see like Azahara, Emmanuel, Elaine, David and Dominica, and all these other young, beautiful, Black, brilliant people, and they just seem like I'm like, look at all these Black people in the Peace Corps. And it's just, you're clearly a foundation of it. And I just love that so many of us are grabbing that experience, bringing it home, agitating, organizing, whatever different ways that they're doing, and it's amazing.
I just wanted to again also say to what Maceo said, just thank you for the opportunity to be here as part of this conversation. It's not a conversation that I'm a part of often, but I think with that said, I appreciate sort of the ability for us to disagree without being disagreeable in this space and still be respectable. You know, I'm thinking about Melvin, even to our elders, how to Mr. Melvin, you know, that we're remembering those pieces of our culture, you know, but with that said, I hope as we continue this conversation, that we continue it in a way that isn't a zero-sum game, either you win or I win, but really look for a place where we can come together and find a place where, you know, at the end of the day, we all care about each other as Black people. And I think that's the connective thread here. Like, I love y'all. I know a couple of y'all in person, but the ones that I just met tonight and the ones I don't even see on the screen, I just see your names. I love you and I have love for you. And I think that love is just Black people. Can we take that and that love for the diaspora and utilize that and come together, even if our perspectives are different, to find a solution that works for us here at home and then across the diaspora? And I think that's how we win as a community, and that's how we liberate as a community.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I really love the fact that everybody brought their, you know, different opinions, but there was no levels of disrespect within these conversations, and everybody was able to respect what everybody brought to the table. So that was perfect. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Definitely follow both of our Instagram pages, and that's where you will find like our YouTubes, our Twitters, Facebooks, all those things. And we are so thankful that we had our speakers here tonight and all of you audience members.
And you send the list of the speakers' email addresses so we can have follow-up? Is that possible? Or Lindsay or somebody should do that. Okay. And I just want to thank the one Diaspora Coalition and the Decolonized Peace Corps group for pulling this off. I think you did a remarkable job. I think this has been a very useful forum, and I'm hoping that there's a tape that comes out afterwards. I certainly will post it on the CFA Facebook page and others. But I'm intending to follow up with you guys. You know, so I want to just thank you guys for doing it. And you're coming from the Smile Coast. You don't smile a whole lot, you know?
Me?
What's up with that?
I've been smiling this whole time.
Nah, Umi is the smiliest person I've ever met in my life.
I'm always smiling.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Okay, I accept that.
Hey, can I get a little TV timeout hostess? Can we like ask people to get on camera and like do an amazing photo? Like, is that?
That'd be good. Hey, bravo.
Yeah, y'all can get on. I'm trying to type in all the speakers' emails in the chat box so y'all can try and reach out to them if you'd like.
Yeah.
Everybody coming up?
Okay. No, Nicole, this look, this background, like, it's everything to me. It's everything to me. Like, wow. Wow.
Thank you, Zahara.
Okay, I finally figured out how to get everybody on one page. Okay.
You young people should know how to do this. You know?
I know, us young people.
You're lucky to have me on at all. I don't know how to use a computer.
Oh, people fixing their hair and everything.
We gotta come correct.
Tell me before you take it so I can show Mr. Melvin my big old smile.
Well, you two, all the Gambians I know a lot of Gambians. You know, they're always smiling. You don't know anything other than the smile.
No, for real, we don't.
That's great.
Oh, no, I'm smiling.
Are you taking it?
I took mine. Shoot, I don't know about y'all. Like,
no, please take it again. I know.
Okay.
Like,
I mean, everybody got a screenshot function, right?
Perfect.
Okay.
Wow, thank y'all tonight thank y'all so much for tonight's robust convo and for everyone who was here. This was beautiful.
Yeah,
Love
I
us.
loved it.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. You know, this is good.
And I was going to say, Maceo, you've always been my keeping it real friend. I think Zahada is your female counterpart for keeping it real.
Bye.
So I honor and appreciate each of you for all of your wisdom and sharing your experiences.
Okay.
It was nice and beautiful being part of this process. So thank you.
Thank
Girl,
you.
it's good
Ashe,
seeing you.
Ashe.
All right, y'all. I typed in everybody's emails if y'all want their information. But again, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. You have a wonderful night. This will be recorded and posted.
Good night.
Misha, are you in South Africa right now?
No, but soon, very soon. We
Oh, okay. I didn't know you had a
We're gonna
dog.
get our freedom and get up out of here.
Right.
I'm so done.
I'm out. I gotta get out of DC.
That part.
Facts.
Pandemic. I just be forgetting. David, you good out there?
Yeah. Just finished the semester, first semester of grad school. So I'm, burnt out right now.
Okay.
All right, folks, I'm gonna head out. Thank y'all so much.
All right, sister.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.